So if you haven't seen part 1 to my previous video about why you quit Yu-Gi-Oh, it's basically a follow-up video to my previous video where I talk about why I think people quit Yu-Gi-Oh. But in part 1, I decided to take a look at a bunch of comments from my initial video, and I read the reasons why many of you quit Yu-Gi-Oh. So since a lot of you left a bunch of responses, I've decided to make a part 2 to this series, so that we can hopefully understand why so many people quit Yu-Gi-Oh, along with their reasons. And that's my basic goal for this video series, especially since there's no hard statistics showing the reasons why people quit. So without any further ado, let's get into it. This user says, "Because I love dueling in the same way as classic duel monsters, that means I can't ever go to locals, unless I don't care that I'd get demolished, which I want to win sometimes. That's part of the fun, not all, but part of it." UFO Lock says, "I quit because the local community was so toxic, came back and found out that the game is just awful these days, with a whole bunch of dumb shit and turns that go on for way too long and play half the deck. The worst part is the current community loves to blubber and whine that early Yu-Gi-Oh had issues too. It ain't like DM, GX, or 5D's era Yu-Gi-Oh were perfect, and you can point at a ban list that sucked in each one, but they always seem to skip over the fact that those were ban lists. A brief period of 6 months, whereas now it's the whole dang game." So yeah, unfortunately there's a subset of the Yu-Gi-Oh community that can be very toxic, and I have heard of people quitting because of how awful some players can be, and because of the rampant stealing issue present in Yu-Gi-Oh. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality that has driven people to their wits' end, and it's to the point that they've quit. But in terms of his other point, he's right, there's no perfect Yu-Gi-Oh era, and each did have a bad ban list. But previous eras such as DM, GX, and 5Ds, they were definitely more structured and balanced in the sense that they were slow enough to allow player interaction as opposed to the modern day turbo strategy that he kind of refers to. It went down as soon as they started dueling in bikes, like WTF.
Because in the future, card games will be played on motorbikes. That is the stupidest thing that's ever come out of your mouth. Card games on motorbikes. Come on!
The Nail says, "This was a really good video. Really encapsulated why I don't play Yu-Gi-Oh anymore. Power creep is insane in Yu-Gi-Oh, and power creep comes with costs to play, like that annoying little brother that one of your friends has to bring everywhere. I haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh in a few years. I've been playing Magic ever since I stopped play, but I recently tried to play a game with a bud of mine. I thought I made a pretty well-rounded deck based off my prior knowledge. I was completely blown away with how my bud completely popped off in one turn, bring out 3 boss monsters in one very long turn and crushing me. Made me really think about just how much the game has changed. You need to keep up with the game like no other TCG. With Magic, it's very easy to play more casually. I can buy singles and save a lot of money to get the hottest cards, or there's plenty of very viable options instead of the hottest, most expensive card on the market. Also, I can easily ignore a set that doesn't interest me right away, and later get some singles if something I overlooked or just wasn't interested in becomes more viable." Another thing that makes Magic so fun is Commander. It's inherently casual, but can easily become competitive, but you also only need 1 copy of each card in your deck. I feel like I kinda wandered off on a tangent, but I just wanted to share some of my thoughts while complimenting your great video. Thank you kindly. I wish you the best. First off, thank you for your kind words, and thank you for sharing your story. I'm sorry that you've kind of had a rough reintroduction into Yu-Gi-Oh! But yeah, your story is one that I've heard very often. People try to re-enter the game, but then they quickly figure out that the game has vastly changed to the point where it's way too quick, too complicated, and the meta moves way too fast that it feels overwhelming. Unfortunately, Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't very beginner friendly, nor is it friendly to people looking to re-enter the game. And it's something I wish Konami could address, and it's something that I go into more detail in other videos. This user says, reasons why I quitted Yu-Gi-Oh! In no particular order. People take forever to finish each turn. Most hand traps are either broken or annoying as fuck. Destroying monsters does not mean much anymore since they all have effects that summon themselves or other monsters. Naturia Beast is still unlimited. I can barely play anything anymore. Things get destroyed almost instantly. Pendulums suck. Too much text in the cards. Too much power creeping. Maybe if Konami puts a limit to the amount of special summons, then I will return to the game. I don't care if some balanced, underpowered decks become trash with this rule change. This change is a necessary evil. Yeah, that's an interesting take that you proposed, and it's something that I've thought of for a while. And while I see the potential fix by limiting the amount of special summons, it does kind of undo Yu-Gi-Oh's very fast-paced nature, and its natural ability to have these intricate combos, which Yu-Gi-Oh is kind of known for. So yeah, that's a tough call to make, and I don't know if it will cause more people to rejoin or quit because of it. I quit the game simply because I was no longer able to keep up with how quickly the game changes. This user says, I quit because of 3 reasons. Reason 1, when you are living in a nation when people expect you to grow up and be mature when your loved ones, co-employees, learn that you are still playing Yu-Gi-Oh! They will judge you as immature, money waster, poor hygiene that makes you regret the path that you choose. Reason 2, no time to play because of the career or job. Reason 3, I became uninterested in the game that my collection of cards and decks is I bestow to the younger player, just like passing the torch. Oh yeah, there's definitely still a stereotype and a level of ridicule that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players get from the public. Although it's not as bad as it was back in the day, it's still present and it's still tempting to quit for these reasons. And it definitely becomes more apparent as life becomes busy and complicated. Again, just check out my Yu-Gi-Oh! Horror Stories videos. Wolf Jarl says, the game is just poorly managed and doesn't really give a crap. Then again, it's Konami, the company that's actively killing its own market. It definitely feels like Konami does place minimal effort into managing the game, and things like not having an official Yu-Gi-Oh! Ruling page that's Konami approved only really creates more of that gray area when you're trying to figure out how to properly play the game. And the overabundance in irrelevant archetypes and poorly thought out card design only really adds to the idea of there being minimal effort placed into Yu-Gi-Oh! Mike Key says, I can find people to play casual MTG or would like to play with my casual decks, not so much in Yu-Gi-Oh! I would even try and provide casual decks for Yu-Gi-Oh! But most times people would not play. I even tried speed duel decks, and nothing. I could only get people to play my GOAT format decks, and that's it. So we have another person quitting Yu-Gi-Oh! And going over to Magic. And I do relate with what this person says, since Magic does make it feel like you can viably play non-meta or casual decks, without getting blown out of the water. Although I'm sure that there are some exceptions, it's drastically less pronounced in Magic the Gathering from my experience. And it's easier to play casual Magic than it is to play casual Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just overly complicated, and it relies on very long-winded strategies. This person says, I will always have a special place in my heart for Yu-Gi-Oh! I started the game from the beginning, but the reason I left Yu-Gi-Oh! Was indeed the power creep, was and is so overwhelming in the game. It was pointless to play my beloved deck, and the deck options were so limited if you wanted to play competitive. Heck, I mean it's even hard to play casual without a specific set of rules. I do understand the company has to make money, which made me waste money because I couldn't enjoy the game and my cards wouldn't retain any value. But when I switched to MTG and found the games did seem more balanced as far as playability towards each other depending on your format. MTG also has more formats to explore and the cards tend to hold better value. Also, I feel like deck building tend to have a bigger window for creativity. Is MTG perfect? Nope, not at all. You still have a meta and it's still expensive, but at least I can enjoy playing the deck I want. Angela White says, I still play Yu-Gi-Oh from time to time, but my main deck has been Floodgate Monarchs for some time now. It's fun, powerful, and simple enough to get by without having to know about the newest systems. Do I lose to higher tier decks? Of course I do. The time of Monarchs has passed after all. However, if I can actually set my Floodgate up turn 1, then it decimates newer decks as long as I don't get negated, since newer decks rely on the extra deck and special summoning. It's a gamble, but the game has always been that way. It's great to see people get super salty up against Monarchs, besides the fact that Monarchs are old at this point. Okay, so this isn't really a reason why this player quit Yu-Gi-Oh, but this person kind of talks about the power disparity between meta and non-meta decks. She puts into perspective that you will understandably experience more losses to meta decks, but it does describe the path that many players take when they get back into the game, and it's almost like a summary of the reasons why returning players may be put off by how the game has changed. Duke Apple says, Master Rule 4 made me quit, Master Rule 5 fixed things, but in this era, it's way too fast now. Drip Izuku says, because it's toxic and not friendly to new players. Ghost Emblem says, I stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh because every deck became an island. Everything had a busted effect that only worked with cards of its archetype and couldn't be used in other decks. I realize now that they were trying to force people to buy new cards, but it just put a shelf life on every new release, because it couldn't be used in new or old decks, whilst at the same time walling out existing decks. When you wall the existing decks and make the new ones worthless every format, then obviously people are going to quit. So it looks like this guy quit a very long time ago. He mentions that Yu-Gi-Oh made a shift to a more archetype-based strategy, which was part of the reason why the game put him off. I distinctly remember that era, and it does feel like Konami was trying to streamline their marketing tactics. But unfortunately, it did give them too much of a reason to kill off previous decks, so that they could promote their new decks, which is kind of anti-consumer in my opinion. And although I understand some decks eventually have to fade away, this did add a compelling incentive to do so. However, it's not all that bad since you can still combine old cards with new cards so that you can get a modern day deck. And that's been one of Yu-Gi-Oh's strong points in my opinion. This person says, I can't read the effects on cards anymore. So yeah, these have been your reasons for quitting Yu-Gi-Oh! And honestly, reading through all of your different viewpoints has really been insightful, and it does put into perspective where Yu-Gi-Oh! Stands now. And it does at least give us a starting point as to where Konami can improve, along with where they can appeal to new or returning players. But with that pretty much wraps it up for this video. If you would like to support more content like this in the future, you can do so at my Necromancer 1040 Patreon link down below. I normally post it in the description, and you can check it there along with the other cool things I normally post down below. And with that, thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for your support, and I'll catch you in the next one. Alright, take care.